Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third day of the Stay at Home camp. My name is Peter and I'm going to be your mentor today. So far you have learned the basics of HTML and CSS, and now we are going further and we are going to learn more advanced things about HTML and CSS, how to position things, how to create images, links, and a few more advanced topics. But before that, let me introduce myself. I am Petty, and I used to work as a senior software engineer for a few years, and after that I also worked as a Scrum Master for another few years, and roughly 2 years ago I joined Greenfox Academy because I always was interested in education. I really liked teaching and explaining things, and I thought, why not do this full time? So 2 years ago I joined Greenfox, and since then I'm a mentor here, and it was an awesome journey so far. So, what are we going to do today? We are going to create this page here, right here. It looks a bit more advanced than the previous one, right? It starts to look as a website right now. Before that, I'm curious how many of you were able to solve exercises yesterday. So I want you to put in the chat the number of exercises you were able to solve yesterday. Okay, 7, 8, 8, 8. Oh, wow, Roberto, nice work. Wow, a lot of you were able to solve every single exercise. That's pretty awesome. 7, 8. Okay, so apparently, oh, great. Okay, you are doing really well, really well. Awesome job, everyone. Pretty cool. So you are now prepared. So yesterday you were able to practice a lot about HTML and CSS apparently, which means that we can move on and learn a bit more advanced topics. So let's check out this website we are going to create together. As you can see, there are several boxes here. For example, if you check out, the whole page is basically inside the box, and something interesting is going on here. If you check out, this box is in the middle of the page. So on the left hand side of the page and also on the right hand side of the page there is automatical spacing. It's evenly distributed between the left and the right hand side of the page. So it's always in the middle. There are other boxes here as well. For example, of course, there is a box for the newsletter sign up. There are 3 other boxes which are next to each other. And there is another box here in the bottom right corner next to my head here. This little question mark. So we are, as you can see, we are going to learn a lot about positioning today. We are going to learn how to position things next to each other. We are going to learn how to position a box in the bottom right corner. We are also going to learn a lot about in CSS and HTML in general. Pretty cool. So let's get started then. First of all, I'm going to start with the newsletter box. So I'm going to create a box for the newsletter, and then I'm going to create a heading, a paragraph, an input text field, and a button. But before that, I need to create a container, so the outermost box for the full page. So first I need to create a box which will contain all the other boxes. So who knows how to create a box in HTML? Put in the chat how to create a box. div. Yeah, main. Oh yeah. Div and main, these are also, both of them are good ideas. Frame, form. Yeah, most of you put frame. No, most of you put div, main. Let's go with the div now. So I've opened up a empty CodePen right here, and let's start by creating a div. So I'm going to add a class for this div. This is going to be the container. And the width of the container is 600 pixels. So this is 600 pixels. So I'm going to go in the CSS and I'm going to use the selector to select the container class, which requires, of course, a dot container. And I'm going to say the width should be 600 pixels. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And inside the container, I have a title, which is awesome landing page. So how do you create a title? What's the HTML tag for that? Yeah, I made a typo here, thank you. So what is the HTML tag for the title? H1, yes. We are going to use H1 here. And now we have the awesome landing page. That's pretty cool. So I really want to see the whole container. So I'm going to set the background just temporarily because I want to see the whole container. So let me set a green background. So now we can see that we have our container here, but currently it's not in the middle of the page. So what I ideally want to do is I want to have a left margin and a right margin. And I want these to be automatically divided into two. So I want the rest of the space to be divided. For that, I'm going to use auto margin. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to specify the margin. If I only want to specify the left margin, I can say margin left, and I can set it to auto. I can also specify the right margin by saying margin right and auto as well. So now my container is in the middle of the page, and it's always in the middle. If I change the size of the page, you can see it still stays in the middle. So this is what auto margin means. That's why I was using auto margin. This way the content is always going to stay in the middle. So this is the first of the positioning features of CSS, the auto margin. This is also the most basic one as well. Great, now I have an awesome landing page. Also, what I want to do is I want to change the font. You already learned to do that yesterday. I'm using the Open Sans font here. So I'm going to quickly Google the Open Sans font. I'm going to open Google Fonts, as I already showed that to you yesterday. And now I'm going to be able to use the regular font, and I'm going to be able to copy the link here and add this link to my HTML, save and close. And now I can say that I want to use the font family to be Open Sans. Okay, now my font is much better. It looks pretty much the same as the page. Okay, I'm going to remove the green background. I don't need that anymore. So I can use my awesome landing page without a background. And I'm going to start creating this form. For that, of course, I'm going to create a form tag. I won't have an action right now. By the way, question. What do you have to put inside of the action attribute? Who knows that? Put into the chat. So what goes inside of the font action of the form? No, not post or get. Not really. Yes, the server URL. Yes, the server's URL. Yes, you are Milan and Levente, you are correct. So it's the action is the URL, is the address of the server where you actually want to send the data of the form. So when you submit a form, all the data will be sent to this address. For example, this could be a full address like http example.com, and when the user submits the form, all the data will be sent to this address. Yeah, but right now I don't really have a server to send the data to, so I'm going to leave this empty right now. Okay, so what do I need? I do need, inside the form, I need a heading. So I'm going to create an H3, and it's going to be newsletter. And I also need a paragraph. So I'm going to create a new paragraph here. Okay, that's cool. Also, I need an input tag and I need a button as well. So let's create the input tag. The type of the input tag is right now text. And I also need a button as well. And the button, on the button I have subscribe. Subscribe. Okay, what other types of input do you know? Put it in the chat. So text is the default type. What other types are available for the input? Email, yes. András, you are correct. What else? Do you remember anything from... Yeah, password. Yeah, as I showed you how to create a password. It could be a date as well, yes. Yes, radio checkbox. Exactly. Cool. There is a text area as well. That's a different HTML tag. Coolio. Cool, cool, cool. So button, we need to specify the type of the button. In this case, this is going to be a submit button. And let's go back to the page I'm creating. Well, it looks kind of different. There are a lot of differences. But my main problem here is that on the page, the input text and the button are below each other. So the button is below the text box. And in my page, the button is next to the text box. So it's in the same line. Why is that? Why is the button in the same line as the text box? yes, I could use BR as well. That's a good solution. So I could, yeah, Petra and Milan are correct. Yes, Reka as well. So yes, you are correct. I could put a BR in here, which would make them on a different line, but that's the default behavior is that they are so-called inline elements. So both the button and the input are inline elements, which means that they will not start on the new line, but they will start on the same line as the previous element, because they are so-called inline elements. On the other hand, for example, the paragraph and the H1 and H3 elements, these are all block elements. So as you can see, the paragraph starts on a new line. The H3 starts on a new line, but the button is an inline element, so it doesn't start on a new line. And some of you already gave the solution for this problem. Yeah, what I can do is I can change this default behavior. So the default behavior of the button and the text box to be inline elements, but I can change that behavior to be block by using the display CSS property. So first I need to select the input. For that I'm going to create a, well, I can use the name of the element. So I could simply say input, because I don't have other inputs on the page, right? So this would select the input field. But this is not really a good practice, because this way I would change every single input element on my website. I don't really want to change every single input element. I want to be a bit more specific than that. Not every single input element, but only this input element. ID, yes, you gave a good solution. So I could give an ID to be more specific. So I could give a unique ID for this input. I wanted to show you another thing, actually. So what I want to do, I want to put the whole newsletter sign up. So I'm going to put the whole newsletter sign up in its separate box. Like that. I'm going to use div for that. So the whole newsletter form is inside of this div right now. And I'm going to give a class for this div. The class for this div is going to be newsletter form. And now what I can do is I can say the input which is inside of my newsletter form. This is how I select the input inside of the newsletter form. I simply put a space after the newsletter form and then I say input. This way I selected every input field inside of the newsletter form, but I do not change every other input on my page. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say display block. Now the subscribe button is actually below my text box. I want to do the same for the button as well. So I'm going to say newsletter form button. It should be block as well. So now they are both on their separate line. I could do the opposite as well. So the paragraph and the H3 tag, so the 3 header, are block type elements. I could make them to be inline elements. So what I could do is I say h3 display inline, and also if I change the paragraph to be display inline, so they are now in the same line. See, so now the h3 and the paragraph are now next to each other. They are on the same line now. That's because I changed their display property to inline. Okay, someone said I should be slower. Okay, I'm going to try to be a bit slower. Keep in mind that you don't have to type while I'm showing you. I'm just doing a demo here. The whole code is going to be available for you and the recording as well. So you will be able to watch this later. But you don't have to type what I do type right now. So you don't have to code at the same time. You just have to watch me. Okay, so great. So this is the display inline and the display block. Yeah, I mean, the final solution is going to be available for you in the CodePen. We are going to post this link. So you're going to see everything what I did today, and you can rewatch the recording as well. Okay, so right now I don't want the newsletter and the sign up to our newsletter to be in the same line. So I'm going to delete the inline properties. So this is correct right now. The newsletter, the paragraph, the input text box, and the subscribe button are all in their own separate line thanks to the display block CSS property here. They are not inline now. Okay. So what did I do so far? So yeah, let's do a quick summary. So far, I showed you how to select the input field, which is inside of a specific box. So for example, I selected the newsletter form div. The newsletter form div. Inside of the newsletter form, we have an input and a button. They are all inside of this newsletter form div. And what I said is that the input, which is inside of the newsletter form, the display of this input should be block, which means it should not be in line, which means that it should be on its separate line. The same goes for the button as well. I said that the button, which is inside of the newsletter form, the display of this button should be block, which means it should be on its separate line. Okay, great. So let's compare my current state to the desired website. Well, it's pretty far. One difference is that here in the solution, the text box is full width. So it takes up the whole line. Same goes for the button. It's full width. It takes up the full line. So what we can do here is we can change the width of the newsletter form input to 100%. Now it takes up the full line. And I do the same for the button as well. Yes, I could do width 600 pixel here, because we know that the width of the container is 600 pixels. But it's better to go with 100%, because if I change the width of the container later, because you can imagine that in a few days I realize I actually wanted to make this container larger, and I change it to 700, and then I have to change here, here, and here as well. Instead, I don't have to change that. And I just say it should be 100%, which means that it will take up the whole space, the whole available space in the parent container. And a good question is, why is the text box wider than the subscribe button? And I'm going to answer that in a few moments. Let's continue with our design, because there are a few things to do here. First of all, the color of the button, the background color, is green, and I'm going to change the background. Background color to, and I have this color code. I already prepared the color code. This is actually the GreenFox green. So if you go up to the website of GreenFox Academy, you'll see that this green color is there. But I still have this border around the button. I want to get rid of this border. Put into the chat, how can I get rid of this border? Yes, I can get rid of the border by saying border 0. This way, our button won't have a border anymore. Okay, cool. Yes, I could say border none as well. That's also a good solution. Pretty cool. Border none. Or I could also set it to GreenFox green. Yeah, I could change it to GreenFox green as well. But I'm going to just get rid of the border. Okay. So let's go back. There are also a few differences here. What is another difference? Another difference is the text color. How do I change the color of the text? Yes. So to change the color of the text, you just say color, and it's white. Okay, that's cool. It's also not tall enough, right? So if I go back to the page, the button should be slightly taller. So I'm going to change the height of the button to 30 pixels. Cool. It starts to look pretty close to what I originally wanted. And another difference is that there is a slight space between the button and the text box. So I'm going to change the margin of the button to 5 pixels. This way I have a slight space between the text box and the button. Okay. Let's work on the text box now. So the text box has a different border. So the border color is grayish, so it's not black, but it's kind of gray. Let's change the color of the border color, and I also prepared with the color code for this, and this is the color code. And something didn't work out right now. What's the problem? So the border, I didn't set the border type, and the default border type is this kind of ugly looking thing. This is the inset or outset border. I'm not pretty sure, but it's kind of ugly. I want to get rid of it. So what I want to do is, instead of this, I want to say border solid, which means I want a single line border. So instead of that ugly looking, I want a solid color. And I want 1 pixel, so I'm going to say thin, which is 1 pixel. So it looks much better right now. And I want to have the same height as the button. So I'm going to copy and paste the height of the button to the input field. Now they have the same height. Cool. Okay. So if I start to type here, I have a problem here. So when I start to type here, you see that the text starts at the very beginning of the text box, and it looks ugly. I want a little space here. How do I put that little space here? Yes, I need padding. That's the correct solution. So what I need is padding left 3 pixels. So now there is a small space between the left border and the text. So it looks much nicer now because it doesn't start at the beginning. Another difference here is if I zoom in, you see that the edges of this text box is not tippy, it's not pointy, it's rounded. This is called the border radius. Yes, exactly, border radius. And I'm going to set it to 3%. And now it looks much nicer. I think this is nicer this way. It looks better. Cool. Now, I think we are kind of close where we want to be. The text input and the subscribe button are quite similar. One difference I haven't changed yet is the text color here. So the color of the text in the paragraph and also in the H1 is a bit, it's not black, it's actually gray. So I want to change every text inside of the newsletter form. So what I do is newsletter form, color gray, for example. So it's gray now, it's not black. One thing to note here, that I changed the color of the whole div. So what I said is I want to change the color of the newsletter form. I didn't change the color of the h3 tag. So if you check out the h3, there is no h3 here. So I didn't change the color of the h3. I just changed the color. I just set the color of the newsletter form, the div. And the h3 element actually inherited this property from the div, because the h3 is inside of this div, is inside of this box. It will inherit the CSS properties from it. That's why the color of the h3 and the color of the p tag, they are both gray, even though I haven't set the color specifically for the h3 and the p. That is called inheritance. The h3 and the p inherited the color CSS property from the parent element, from the parent box. This way, it's much more convenient to use, because I don't have to specify the color one by one. I don't have to specify every single I don't have to specify the color for every single element, but I just specify the color for the parent, and all the things inside of that parent element will inherit the color property. So this is a very convenient feature in C#. So let's go back to the difference of the width. So some of you already noted, which is pretty awesome. Yeah, some of you already noted that there is a difference in the width of the button and of the text box. So the button is slightly shorter than the input box, even though they have the same width set. So both of them have the width set to 100%. And this goes back to the box model. Oze on Monday talked a lot about the box model. And he said that the final width of the element is calculated by the content width plus the padding plus the border. Since the button doesn't have a border and it doesn't have padding, it looks a bit shorter. So that's the trick here. The difference what you see here is the 3-pixel padding and the border. That's the small difference between the button and the input text. So I could fix this by changing the width of the button or adding padding to the button. But there is another solution for this. I can change the calculation as well. What I can do here, in the input, I can say box sizing, border box. What this does is changes the method of calculation. Now, the final width is calculated by subtracting the width of the padding from the width set here. So now, because of this change, they both have the same length. This is one of the easiest solutions to this problem. Okay, so box sizing changes how you calculate. The default behavior, the default value for this is content box. This is the default. This is what Aze told you on Monday. And here, again, the final width is calculated by adding the padding to the width. If you use border box, then the final width is calculated by just using the width specified in the width property. So the padding doesn't matter in this case. Okay, so this is box sizing. Cool. There was another very good question. The color of the button didn't change. So even though the button is inside of the div and the newsletter, so the button is inside of the newsletter form, and I set the color of the newsletter form to gray, the color of the button text is still white. That's because the button has a default text color property, and it's black, but I did override it here to be white. So what I did is I did a more specific definition here. Even though the button is inside of the newsletter form and the newsletter form is gray, I specified the color of the button here to be white, so it's not gray, but it's white. Okay, cool. Great. One thing I wanted to show you, so this is how you override the color property, but I wanted to show you another example of how to override a CSS property. Oh, yeah. So someone told in the comments, if you remove this, it will black. It's black because by default every button has a color property and it's black. That's a browser default. That's why it's black if you don't specify the color here. Okay, so what I want to show is what happens if I have two H3 tags here. So one is the newsletter and one is something else. So if I change the color, if I specify the color of the H3 tags, saying color red, then both H3 tags become red. But if I set an ID for the H3 tag, for example, ID second, and I want to select the second, question for chat. How do you select something by ID? What's the symbol to use? How to select something by ID? Yeah? Yeah, hash mark, right? So what I can say is hash second. Great. Hashtag. Yes. Yes. Good solutions. And I want to change it to color green. Now it's green. So what you can see is for this h3 tag, both this part and this part applies because it's an h3 tag, so its color is supposed to be red, but it also has an ID second, so its color should be green, and the ID wins. That's because the ID is more specific than the tag selector. The tag selector h3, it's very specific. It's very specific. No, I mean the ID is more specific, right? So the h3 is very general. This could mean every single h3 element of the website. So if I had 100 h3 elements, this would apply to all and every single h3 element on the website. On the other hand, this selector is much more specific because only one and only element on the page can have this ID. ID must be unique. So the ID is much more specific than the tag. So when it comes to which one wins, always the more specific wins. In this case, ID is more specific than h3. So that's why you see that the something else is green now and it's not red. That's a very common rule to remember. Always the more specific selector will win when it comes to multiple selectors. Okay, so in the first part, we already learned a lot of new things about CSS. We learned about display block, display inline. We learned about how to specify only the left or the right margin or the top margin. And we learned about border box, box sizing, border radius. We learned about more specific CSS selectors. And so I want to stop here a bit right now, and I want to see if there are any questions I can answer. And I'm going to ask for my mentor helps if they had collected any questions I couldn't answer in the meantime. So I want to open up for a Q&A section. Did I miss a question I didn't answer? The CSS part is clear, but not the HTML. So what is troubling with the HTML? So what's the difference between the ID and the class? So the ID must be unique. So if I give an ID to this p tag, I'm not allowed to give the same ID to another tag. So if I would do something like this to specify the same ID for two elements, this would be invalid. So this is invalid because the ID must be unique on the whole page. So this is not valid. On the other hand, for classes, I can use the same class. If I use the class here, class equals unique, I am allowed to specify the same class here as well, because the class is not unique. Not unique. So I can reuse this class on other elements as well. But I'm not allowed to do that with IDs. The ID must be unique, which means I'm only allowed to use one ID on one element. Yes, that's a very good question. Is ID more specific than class? Yes, it is. ID is more specific than the class. When should I use ID versus class? Most of the time you are going to use classes because you don't know if you want to have the same element again in the HTML. If you are sure one element is the only one in the page, you can use ID. But most of the time I just use classes. If there is a element which I know is going to be the only element, this type of element is going to be the only one on the page, then I can use ID. Most of the time I use classes. Can you use div1, div2? No. You are not allowed to use div1 or div2. It's only div. Only h has h1, h2, h3. But the other elements don't have this, only the h. And it goes up to h6, so h7 is not allowed again. Only h1 to 6. And there is no other numbered elements in HTML. Okay. So what are the questions I missed? Can you please show the X button? Yes, I'm going to show you how to create this X button, definitely. And I'm going to create the checkbox as well. Can I use ID and class on the same element? Yes, you can. So an element can have both an ID and it can have a class as well. So that's completely valid to have both class and ID on the same tag, of course. Yes, you can have an ID on a div. Yeah, I mean, I can share you the link. So yeah, of course, if you want to follow, I can share this link with you. So another question. Without box sizing properties, which div is exactly 600 pixel, 100%? So for example, the container div, the width of the container div is 600 pixels, and it doesn't have a padding, and it doesn't have a border. Because it doesn't have a padding or border, its final width is going to be 600 pixels. But if I specify padding 2 pixels, which means I have left padding and I also have right padding, so the final width will end up 604 pixels. That's the final width. If I also had border as well, then it would add to the final width as well. Okay, yeah, let's have a 10-minute break. That's it. That's a good idea. And in the meantime, I'm going to collect the questions from my mentor, partners, helpers, which I missed. Okay, so 10-minute break. We are going to continue at 4:05. Okay, welcome back after the break. I'm going to continue now. There were a few questions during the break. One question was, can I have multiple elements of the same type? For example, can I have multiple P's? Yes, of course, I can have as many P tags as I want. This way, of course, I have 4 paragraphs. That's possible. But you don't need P1, P2, P3. This is just P. So that's the tag. The type of the tag is P, and you can have as many as you'd like to have. Another question was during the break that what are the key combinations? For example, if I want to comment this line, I can press Control slash, and if I am in the English layout, then it will work. So if I hit Control slash with the English layout, it will comment this line. If I hit Control slash N, it will uncomment this line. Okay. Yes, I'm going to show you the X button. I'm going to show you everything. I'm going to build this whole page. So I'm going to show you every single element, how to do every single thing on this page. Another key combination I wanted to show you is how to format the code. So as you can see, my HTML code right now is well formatted. But for example, if my H3 was not on the correct level, so I miss spaces here, what I can do is I can select the line I want to format. For example, I want to automatically format these lines, and I can hit Shift Tab, and using Shift Tab will automatically ident the lines, which is nice. But of course you can manually put spaces there as well. Again, Shift Tab will automatically ident the lines. Cool. So if you have questions later, you can ask, and my mentor helpers will ask the questions. Okay, so next up, I am going to show you how to create the checkbox, and we are going to do this label as well. And after that, I'm going to show you how to create the X button. And in the meantime, we are going to learn a lot about positioning things in HTML and CSS. So, you're already familiar with the checkbox. So I'm going to ask you, how do you create a checkbox in HTML? Yes. Yes, it's an input. Yes, it's an input type, not radio, but it's a checkbox. Yeah, so what I have to do here is I have to create a new input. But this time, I'm not going to create a text, but instead, I'm going to create a checkbox. See, my checkbox is here, but it's huge. Why is my checkbox so huge? It's because in my CSS, if I scroll down in my CSS, you can see that I specified that every single input inside of the newsletter form should be this large. And that's not really correct, right? So I want my text box to be 30% height, to have 30 pixels height, but I don't want my checkbox to be that large. So I have to change. Yes, I can use an ID. So what I can do is, instead of saying, hey, I want to change every single input, I can say, let's give an ID. ID equals email, because this is the input field for the email address. And here, instead of saying input, I'm going to say hashtag email. So the rules now apply to my text field, but they don't apply to my checkbox. That's much better. Now I'm going to create a label for my checkbox. Of course, I am going to use the label HTML tag, label, and the label is going to be a very long text. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to copy and paste the text from here. So I copied and pasted the text from here. I go back and paste the text here. Okay, so the text is there, but one thing I want to show you is, if I go back to the final version, if I click on the label, I just clicked on the label and I clicked again on the label. Now I click on the label and it's checked. But if I go to here, even if I click on the label, my checkbox is not checked. What's the problem here? So what am I missing? Even though I click on the label, my checkbox is not checked. What is missing from here? Yes, I am missing the for attribute. Yeah, that's correct. So I need I need to specify the for, and for that I need an ID, and the ID for this is going to be terms, because this is the terms and conditions checkbox, and I'm going to give an ID for this checkbox, terms. And now I use the same ID here. This way I say for the browsers, hey, this label belongs to this checkbox. Okay, they belong together. So now if I click on the label, my checkbox is going to be checked. How nice is that? So this is how I want it to work. Yeah. Cool. Let's go back to the example page. Here I have a link. Terms and conditions. How do I create a link in HTML? Who knows that? How do I create a link here? Yes. Yeah, good solutions. I need an A tag. So I'm going to have an A tag here. And I want to create a link from terms and conditions. So I'm going to surround the terms and conditions with my A. Yes, anchor tag. Correct, solutions. Yes, A, href, and I don't have URL for my terms and conditions, so I'm just going to say http://example.com. That's just an example URL. It's not a real one. Okay, so this way I created a link, and if the user clicks on it, it will go to this website. Pretty awesome. Okay. I have a problem here what I don't like, I'm going to zoom in. If I zoom in, you'll see that my checkbox is not actually in line with my text. So if I use my line tool, you're going to see it more clearly. So if I draw the line here, you'll see that my checkbox is not really in line. And I'm going to show you different ways to position this checkbox. We are going to talk about positioning now. The checkbox which has an ID terms. And laggy. Okay. I'm not sure why it's laggy. Lag. Bit lag. Why is it laggy? Was it because of zooming in? Maybe it was because of zooming in. Okay, I hope it's better now. It's fine now. Okay, great. So I'm going to position this checkbox. So I'm going to select the terms checkbox, and I'm going to show you different ways to position this checkbox. So to position something, the first solution is to use position, and you have multiple options here. You have multiple options. The first one I'm going to show you is called the relative position. Relative position means I want to position this element based on where it's right now, based on its current position. So currently, my checkbox is here. I'm going to show you the lines. I want to draw the lines here to see where my... So this is the base position. And when I use relative positioning, I'm positioning my element based on this position, the base position. And I can say top 5 pixels. You see that compared to my base position, it's now it has 5 pixel space at the top. If I say left 5 pixels, you'll see that compared to its base position, it now has a left space. So this is relative positioning. If I set it to 0, I go back to the base. So that's relative. So for example, if I use relative and I want to fix this issue that it's not in line with the text, I can fix it by setting the top position, for example, to 1 pixel. No, that's not enough. 2 pixels. That seems to be okay. Or 3 pixels. Nah, 3 is too much. It's too much. Let's go back to 2. So this is the relative positioning. I'm going to delete this now. The other way to position, the other main type, is of course the absolute positioning. And let's see what happens here. So when I change the position to absolute, you can see that the checkbox is actually removed from the natural flow of the page. So naturally, the checkbox should come before the text. What do I mean by natural flow? If I comment this out, this is the natural flow. This is the natural flow because in the HTML, if you go from top to the bottom, the input comes before the label. So the natural flow is the checkbox is to appear before the label. If I change the order in the HTML, so if I move the input, so I cut the input from here and move it here, then you can see that the checkbox is now, it comes after the label. Because in the HTML, now the input is below the label. So that's the natural flow. This is the basic flow of the HTML. Let's move it back. But if I use absolute positioning, my checkbox is actually removed from this natural flow. It's not even part of the page. It just floats here. It's above the label now. And now if I set the top to 0 and the left to 0 pixel as well, where is it now? It's up here. It's up here. So this is the absolute positioning. It will find a suitable parent element. In this case, the parent element is the whole page, because I haven't specified it differently. So the suitable parent element, the position, is the whole page, so my checkbox is up here. So that's not what I want. That's definitely not what I want. What I actually want, in this case, is relative positioning. Oh, I didn't want to delete this. I want to go back to relative positioning, and I think 2 pixels was correct. So this is great. So to sum up, relative positioning will position to the current position of the checkbox. So this is the current position of the checkbox. If you use relative positioning, you will position the element based on the current position. And if you use absolute positioning, it will remove the element from the flow and you can position it absolutely on the page. So a natural question is, when do I want to use the absolute positioning? And that's why I created this small x here. This x is not really part of the natural flow of this page. It just floats in this box. So I'm going to use absolute positioning to position this x in the corner of this box. First, I want to create the border for this box so it's more apparent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a border to the newsletter form. And I'm going to add a border for my newsletter form. And the border is going to be solid, thin, and I want to use the same color as I used for my input. Where is my input? Oh, here is it. So I want to use the same color as I used for my input. Okay. And, oh, it's ugly now. Why is it ugly? What am I missing? Wow. Yes, Yuji, I could have used field set as well. Now I just used the div, but field set is correct, yes. So but why is it ugly now? I'm missing something here. Margin. Yeah, it could use some margin, but mainly padding. Yeah, I miss padding here. So padding, for example, 3 pixels. Okay. Oh no, more than 3. It's still ugly. 5 pixels. Okay, it's better now. So maybe even more, right? 10. Yeah, I like this. 10. What I don't like though is now my H3 element. There is a large gap here. That's because my H3 element has a top margin. So by default, every H3 element has a bottom margin, and also has a top margin here as well. So in this case, I don't really like the top margin of the H3. So I'm going to remove that top margin. So I'm going inside the newsletter form, and I'm going to say if I'm inside of the newsletter form and it's an H3 tag, I want the top margin to be 0. Oh yeah, that's much better. That's much better. Great. And one thing is missing, the border radius, because I don't want this pointy edge. I want it to be curvy. So I'm going to copy the border radius from here to my newsletter form. And cool, that's great. Now it's not pointy anymore, it's curvy. So next up, I want to create the X button. Again, there is an X button, it's just floating here. So I'm going back to my HTML. And in my HTML, I'm going to create a new div. And inside of the div, there will be an X. I could have added an image as well. I'm just simply going to have an X here. And right now, because it's at the bottom of my newsletter form, so this is my newsletter form, and here is the X, it's at the bottom of the form. My X appears here at the bottom, but I don't want it to be here. I want to remove it from this point, this position, and I actually want to position relative to the newsletter form. Relative to the newsletter form, I want to position the X. So for that, I'm going to give position relative to the newsletter form. This means that everything which is inside of the newsletter form should be positioned relative to the newsletter form. And then I need to select this X. To be able to select this X, I'm going to give a class for the X, which is going to be closing X class. So I can go back to the CSS now, and I can say that my closing X should be positioned absolute, because I want to remove it from the flow. See, now it is removed from the flow. It's almost like it's not part of the newsletter box anymore, because it's absolute positioned. And now what I can say is I want the X to be at the top of the newsletter form, and also I want it to be on the right hand side. So what I'm going to say is top, for example, well, let's start with 0, and we are going to go from there. when I said top 0, it immediately jumped up to here. So my X is here now. That's good. But I want it to be on the right hand side. So I'm going to say right 0 pixels. So thanks to that, my X is now in the top right hand side of the newsletter box. I don't really like that. I want it to be a bit more, I want to have more space here. So I'm going to increase the right to 5 pixels. Okay, that looks good. See, so that's how you use absolute positioning. So you use absolute positioning when you want to remove something from the flow, from the natural flow, and you want it positioned to somewhere completely else. And you use relative positioning. I used relative positioning, for example, for the checkbox. You use relative positioning if you just want to slightly adjust something compared to its current position. You don't want to remove it, you just want to position slightly. Okay. I'm going to stop a little bit. Closing X. I'm going to stop and see if there are any questions which I haven't answered. Okay, I don't see any unanswered questions in the chat. Oh, there is one. Why is class? Why not ID? I used class here because there are maybe multiple closing X's in my website. So I can imagine having multiple boxes like that. So a newsletter box, a sign up box, a login box, several boxes can have an X. So this element may appear several times. And if an element may appear several times, then I'm going to use class and I'm not going to use ID because it may appear more than once. So that's why I used class here. I can show the whole HTML, sure. Okay. So absolute positioning and relative positioning are two main positioning techniques you should learn. And there is another type of positioning, which I'm going to show you. I'm going back to the original page I wanted to create. In the original page, you see here, there is a question mark. And what happens here, this question mark is always in the bottom right-hand side of the page. So even if I scroll down, so this question mark, it always stays here. Oh, maybe I'm in the way. So even if I scroll down, the question mark stays here. And I'm going to show you how to create this question mark, which always stays in the bottom right corner of the page. Cool. This is called the fixed positioning. So let's create a new div just for this question mark. This div is going to be outside of my newsletter form. So here is my newsletter form. And outside of the newsletter form, I'm going to create another div. And inside of this div, there will be a question mark. So currently, my question mark is here. And I'm going to give styling for this question mark. I'm going to use ID for this because I don't think there are multiple question marks. Question circle. I'm going to call it question circle. How about that? So this is my question circle. It's not really a circle right now. I'm going to make it a circle. And I'm going to show you a little trick how to create a circle in CSS. So let's go down. I am going to select the question circle. And first of all, I want to make it larger. So I'm going to set the height 200 pixels. And I'm going to set the width 200 pixels as well. And I'm going to give the same green color as the button. Where is my button? Here's my button. I'm going to use the same green color so that you see. Oh no, I used ID, then I used a dot here. So I made a mistake. This should be a hash, right? Cool. Now I want to have a circle, but this is actually a rectangle. The easiest way to create a circle in CSS is to use border radius. And if I set border radius to 50%, I'm going to end up with a circle, because this means I want to have the border radius 50% of the width and height of my box, which means a circle. Yeah. How nice is that? That's much better, but my question mark is not really looking like what I want it to look like. So first of all, I want to set the color to white. Then I'm going to increase the font size to 50 pixels. How about that? Now it's not large enough. Going with 70. Okay, it's much better now. But it's not in the middle. It's on the left-hand side. So I'm going to use the text align to center. This means I want to align the text in my box to the center of my box. Okay. So my question mark looks kind of okay. It's a circle, it has a question mark, it's green, but it's not in the correct position. What I want is to be always here in the bottom right corner of the page. For that, I'm going to use position again. This is the position, but instead of saying relative or absolute, I'm going to say fixed, which means it's always there, even if I scroll away. And I'm going to say bottom 10 pixel, for example, and right 10 pixel. Great, so it's here. So even if I let's try it out. What if I scroll away? If I scroll away, it still stays in the bottom. It's always in the bottom of the page. It doesn't matter where I scroll. It doesn't really matter where I scroll. It's always here at the bottom of the page, at the bottom right hand side. Cool. So this is the fixed positioning. So far we have learned three types of positioning: the relative, which positions to the current position, the base position; the absolute, which positions based on the parent element; and the fixed, which is always in the specific part of the page. There are other more advanced versions of position, but today we are going to only learn about these three most common types of positioning. I'm going to start a new Q&A session. I'm going to ask my mentor helpers if I had any questions not answered, which I should answer. Did I miss an answer which I should answer in the stream? Okay, there was X sign, so here is one question was about the X sign. So if I go back to my one thing I realized I missed is, if you go back to the solution, you see when I go above the X sign or X sign, my cursor change to a hand with a pointing finger. And I can do that by changing, where is my closing X? Here is my closing X, and I say cursor pointer. So this way, if I move my mouse above the X, it will turn into a hand with a pointing finger. And one question is how I actually make it to work. So obviously, what you would expect is if I click on the X button, it should close the whole box. And you can do that by writing some JavaScript code. And next week, you will actually learn how to do that. So next week, you are going to learn how to write the JavaScript code, which handles the click event on the X button. And you are going to also learn how to get rid of this whole block using JavaScript. So that's JavaScript magic to use. Today we are going to stop here, and next week we are going to, if you continue next week, you are going to learn this, how to do this. Oh, that's a very good question. So X supposed to be a button. That's a very good point. So if I want to have correct HTML, I should make my X to a button. That's a very good point. So what I can do is I can surround my X with a button, and this way it will be correct. Also, it turns green, of course, because right now every button inside of the newsletter form is green. So what I can do here is I can remove the background from my X button. So what I can do is go to the closing X, and what I can say is I don't want to have a background for my closing X, but it's not the closing X, but the button inside of the closing X. So like this. Please kill my background. It doesn't want to kill my background. What am I missing here? So in this case, if you can't figure out what you miss here, you can use the developer tools in Chrome. Who has used the developer tools? If you have used the developer tools in Chrome before, put a 1 in the chat. Yeah, some of you already use the developer tools. You can open up the developer tools by right-clicking on the element, and you can say inspect. So here, as you see, there is the inspect. And what I can do is, if I click on the inspect, it will open up my Chrome developer tools. The Chrome developer tool, this is basically your best friend as a developer, because what you see is it will show you what the HTML of the page, and you can select part of the HTML, and you can check what rules are applied. So what you see here is my background color red is disabled, and the newsletter form button is the winner. And that's because, I think it's because it's above in the CSS code. So if I move this to the below this rule, I'm going to move it below this rule, it will turn it to red. So if one CSS rule is not more specific than the other, so here the CSS selector, newsletter form button, and the closing X button, they are not more, one is not more specific than the other. So they are on the same level. If they are on the same level, then the one which is below the other will win. So because this comes after this part, that's because this rule wins. If before, this rule was above the first rule, so this one win. Cool. So this is how you debug. If you have something in your HTML or CSS which doesn't work what you would like to work, then you can open up the developer tool and fix it. And hopefully, if I say background none, this will remove the background. But now the color turned to white, so I want to turn it back to black. Cool. So yes, this is more correct. Having the X inside of the button, that's the correct way of doing things. Yeah. Yeah, so one question is, if I specify the ID, then the ID will be more specific. So if I use the ID here and I use the same rules for this ID, it will win over the class because the ID is more specific. But I don't really want to use ID here because I said earlier, I really want to have multiple X's. So this button could appear multiple times on the website. There could be a closing button for other boxes as well, so I don't really want to use ID in this case. Okay. Will we add a link to the question mark? We can add a link to a question mark, sure. So you can add a link here as well. Yeah. And now your question mark is inside of a link. And now it's blue because the default color of the links in HTML is blue, and the default behavior is to have an underline for the question mark. That's why it turned blue and now it has an underline. But of course we can fix that using CSS. I don't really want to do that right now, but I think you can imagine doing that the same way we did with the button. Cool. Are there any other questions I missed? Where did we decrease the size of the checkbox? We didn't decrease the size of the checkbox. It was actually a bug before, because before we turned this into the email, this used to be input, which meant that these rules applied for both the input text field and the checkbox. The checkbox and the text field are both an input field. So this rule applied for both. What we did to fix this was actually a bug. What we did to fix this is we gave a more specific ID to the text box. So the text box now has an ID, email. So we can use, instead of input, we can now specify email. And now these rules won't apply to the checkbox. They will only apply for the text box, not the checkbox. This is how we went back to the original size of the checkbox. This is the default size of the checkbox in Chrome. I didn't change the size of the checkbox. Okay, we can have a break. Yeah, let's have a break. I think that's the best thing to do right now. So let's have a 10-minute break, and let's continue around 5:10. So it's a 13-minute break. How about that? Okay, welcome back from the break. One question most of you mentioned in the comments is that the X button, my cursor doesn't change into the pointer finger anymore. And some of you corrected the HTML. The problem is that the default behavior of the button is not to have this pointer cursor. And in my CSS, I specify the cursor pointer in the closing X. And instead of having it on the closing X is the div. So I have a div with closing X class. And inside of the div there is a button. And the button overrides my cursor to the default cursor. So what I have to do is I have to move the cursor pointer from the closing X to the closing X button. And now it does turn into the pointing finger. It's now a pointer. How nice is that? It's much better now, right? Okay, cool. So, I don't think there were other questions during the break. So, let's continue. Let's go back to the solution the final state I want to achieve. And my newsletter box is pretty much done. It looks very close to what I want it to look. My question mark is also done. And now I have to create these 3 boxes. Now, these 3 boxes are next to each other, and we are going to learn a lot of new positioning tricks on how to put boxes next to each other. We are going to see a lot of tricks and tips which can be used in CSS positioning. But first, let's create the first box. So this box has a nice image and a text. So I'm going to first create a box for this, and then I put an image inside it, and then I'm going to put a paragraph inside it. Okay, I'm going back to my code, and I'm going to close the form now because the form is done. I'm also going to close the question mark, and above the form I'm going to create a new div. This new div will have a class, and I'm going to name this a card. So this box, 1 box out of 3 is a card, so we are going to end up having 3 cards at the end. Now I want to use an image inside of this box, and I think many of you know already how to put an image inside of HTML. So put it in the chat how to create images in the HTML. Yes, correct. All of you are correct. Of course, I have to use an image tag. And in the source, so I've created an image tag, and in the source I have to specify where to download the image from. So this is a web address. I need to specify a web address where the browser can find this image. I already prepared these images. So if I go to the syllabus, I've actually uploaded these images to the syllabus. You can find the images there if you want to. For example, the tree one is the tree.png, and I want to use this image in my own HTML. So every time I find an image, on a website I like and I want to use, I can just simply right click on the image. So I'm going to right click on the image. And I have multiple options. I can either save this image to my computer, or in this case, I want to copy the image address. I want to copy the address of the image. If I click on copy image address and I open a new tab and I paste, you'll see that this is actually the address of the image. So if I hit enter, my browser will actually download this image. See, my image is here now. This is pretty cool. This means that this address belongs to this image. Now what I can do now is, I don't really need this browser tab. I'm going to close this and I'm going to go back to my code, and in the source I'm going to paste the address I just copied, like that. And thanks to that, the image just appeared on my website. So this is how you use an image from a website, from a web address. Now, normally you want to use images from your own website. So what you normally do is, when you have an image on your computer, you upload it on your server, so you can use that image then later on your website. So usually you don't want to use external images, but right now this is the easiest way to do. Later you are going to learn how to actually create your own server, how to upload things to your server. So, and you will see how to do that. Right now we are just learning the HTML part, and that's why we are using a already uploaded image on the website. There is another attribute for the image tag. So the image tag always has a source, that's of course the address of the image, and has an alt attribute. So that's an interesting part. And who knows why it's important to have an alt attribute on an image? Does anyone know that? Has anyone encountered this? The alt attribute? Yeah, that's correct. Accessibility, or for search bots. Yeah, these are all correct answers. So yes, Zhuji also, yes, and Cecilia also answered correctly. So accessibility, yes. So there are browsers out there, for example, browsers created for people who are, for example, blind. They cannot see, and they obviously won't be able to see the image. And there are specific tools created for blind people which will read the alt text instead of having the image. So inside of the alt text you should specify what you can see on the image. So people who don't see this image for some reason, they will be able to know what should have they seen on this image. Right now this image is only for decoration here. In this case you should leave the alt attribute empty, because this is just for decoration purposes. It doesn't have a meaning. So if this image is not available, that's fine. In other cases, when the contents of the image is important, you should describe in the alt tag what you can see on the image. Cool. So I have the image, and now I need to add a paragraph below this image. In the paragraph, I must put plant trees. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to copy plant trees, going back to my code, going to create a paragraph and going to paste the plant trees inside. So now I have this image and I have the plant trees. Cool. My HTML is looking good, but it doesn't really look like what I really want it to look like. So I'm going to apply some CSS here. So I'm going to start somewhere here. Yeah. I'm going to use the class selector. So the card selector. First of all, I want it to have a fixed width. The width should be 180 pixels, and it should have the same green background as the button. Let's go back to my button and copy the background color. Let's copy the background color. Cool. Now I have the background color. And I want the text and the image to be in the center of my box. So I want it to be aligned center. I already used that with the question mark. Who remembers what this was? How did I center the question mark? I want to use the same for plant trees. What was that? Yes, it was text align center. And you can see a very strange behavior here. Even though it's called text align, it also aligns the image as well. So this is kind of misleading because it's not just text align, it also aligns the images as well to the center. This is something to remember. It's just a strange behavior. Also, I want some padding here. So I'm going to apply padding top 20 pixels. Cool. What am I missing? Oh, the color. Yeah, the color should be white. Okay, color white, image, looks good. Let's go back. These are a bit larger. I think these are not actually paragraphs, but these are instead headings. So let's change it from a paragraph to be a heading. So here is my paragraph and I'm going to change it to age 3. Yeah, it's now a bit more similar to the original one. Okay, cool. Let's compare it to the result I want to achieve. Oh, I also need padding at the bottom as well. So let's add a bottom padding. Not just padding top, but I also want padding bottom. Whoa, that's too much. That's too much. Okay, closer, closer. Okay, I think this looks kind of similar to the previous one. But I'm missing spacing here, so between my newsletter box and my card, there should be some space here. How should I solve this? What are your ideas? Put into the chat. Yes, correct. I have to use margin. So what I'm going to use, yes, I could either give a margin bottom to my card, or I can give a top margin for my newsletter. So I'm going to do the later one. I'm going to go to my newsletter form, and I'm going to give a margin top, for example, let's go with 40 pixels. Okay, this looks nice. I like this. Okay, cool. We are getting closer and closer by every step. Cool. So, let's go back to the result I want to achieve. And what I want you to see here is there is actually some shadowing going on here. It looks a bit more sexier this way, thanks to the shadows applied. And now I'm going to show you how to create these nice shadows in CSS. It's actually kind of easy to do. It's just a CSS property. So it's actually go to the card, and in the card I'm going to specify the box shadow property. Box shadow. And I want to show you how this box shadow property works. So if I specify 5 pixels and black, it actually means the first number means the horizontal offset. So it's actually the offset on the x-axis. The second number means the offset from the top, or is it the other way around? Let's test it. So if I change it to 0, yeah, so you can see that if I change the second number to 0, only the x offset applies, so it's here 5 pixels. And if I change this to 0 and change it to 5, only the bottom shadow shows. So this is actually the offset of the shadow. If you say 0, 0, 0, 0, then the shadow is completely behind. The shadow is completely behind my box, so I can't even see the box. Let's go with 5 pixels, 5 pixels. So this way we can see the shadow. And another property we can define. So currently the shadow is solid, so it's completely black. We can make it a bit mushier by specifying the third number, which is the blur. It means that it's not a solid line, but it's like mushy and it's blurred basically. And there is also a fourth number for the box shadow, which is the spread, how far the shadow should spread. So if I specify it to 10 pixels, you can see it spreads out more. It spreads out more. This is how box shadow works. And I can change it to gray. So it's a bit grayer. So it's not that black. But it doesn't look like what it should. Let's go back to the result I want to achieve. So what I want to do, I want to have shadows on every side of the box. And it wants it to be spread out just a very little bit. Just to spread out a little bit outside of the box. So I'm going to set both of the numbers 0, 0, because I want it to be in the center. I don't want to have an offset. I don't want a vertical offset or a horizontal offset. I want it to be in the center. and I want to decrease the spread, for example, to 3 pixel. Yeah, that's kind of what I want. Let's compare it. Well, it's kind of similar now. It's kind of similar now. Maybe just decrease the spread a little bit, for example, to 2. Okay, so I think this looks much more sexier now, having this shadow. Cool, so this is how you create a nice shadow using just CSS. It's kind of easy. Cool, so right now we have a single box, but of course I want to have 3 boxes, right? Because in my original design I have 3 boxes next to each other. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to select my card. This is my card, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it 2 times. So I'm going to hit an enter, and I'm going to hit Ctrl V to paste the same box again. Now I have another box, and I'm going to paste it again, so I have a 3rd box. Of course, I have to change the actual text in the boxes and the image as well. So first I'm going to change the text, make friends. So in the 2nd box, it should say make friends. Make friends. In the 3rd box, it should say profit. We'll say profit. Cool. Now let's go ahead and change the images. So I'm going to go back to the repository where I have all the images, and you can see that they only differ in their names. So it's tree, money, and deal. So I only have to change the name of the file. So the first file, the name of the file is tree.png. That's the name of the first file. The second is deal. And the 3rd one is, I already forgot what it was. It's money, of course. What would it be? It's money. Okay. Cool. So I have the boxes. Boxes are done. Looks cool. The problem is that the boxes now are below each other. Why is that? Why are they below each other? Yes, exactly. Because div is a block element. That's the correct answer. Nice answer. I am using divs, and because div is a block element, they are below each other, which means every block element takes up the whole line, which means that the next element will start in a new line. That's why they are below each other. So one thing I could do is I could say display inline, but this completely breaks, right? I don't really want to do that. I still want to have boxes, and inline elements are not really boxes anymore. They don't have a width or height. They are just small inline elements like a text, like a piece of text. So that's not something I want to do here. That's not correct. Another solution could be to use some sort of positioning. So we already learned positioning, so we could use something like position absolute. Boom. This completely breaks our website. That's also not really correct. What I could do though, I could give a specific class or a specific ID for each box, and I could position them one by one. I think you can imagine that. How would that look like? So I could say position absolute for every box, and what I would do is I would position the first box here by pixel, the second box here by pixel, the third box here by pixel. So I'm just specifying the pixels here, 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 and here. The top, the left, one by one for every single box. First of all, that would be very tedious to specify the top and left positions for every single box on my page. That would take a lot of time, and also it would break very easily. Imagine you, instead of having 3 boxes, you want to have 4 boxes. You have to recalculate all the pixels. So it's not just tedious, it would break almost immediately or after a while when someone wants to change the website. So this is not really flexible enough solution for us. And that's why there is a more flexible tool in CSS, which is called the so-called Flexbox. So we are going to learn how to create Flexboxes in CSS. I'm going to get rid of this, close my tool, and of course I'm going to get rid of the position absolute. That's not really a good solution here. Instead of that, I'm going to use display flex. Not flex, but flex. This is not in the card. This is not what you have to do here, but instead you actually want to surround all your cards with a parent element. So here are the cards. Here are my cards, the first card, second card, and third card. And I'm going to surround my cards with a container. And this is going to be another box. And I'm going to call this the card holder. See? I can name things. So I am going to surround my cards with a card holder. Of course, I want to make sure the indentation is correct. And now, for the card holder, I'm going to specify holder. I just need to be able to type it correctly. For the card holder, I'm going to specify display flex. Boom. So display flex, this is a very flexible tool, and I'm going to show you what features the display flex offer you. There are a lot of things you can do with display flex, a lot of awesome features in CSS. I'm not actually going to show every single feature in the flex feature set of CSS because there are a lot, but I'm going to show you the most important ones. For example, they are now next to each other, which is pretty awesome, but in the actual solution, there is kind of space between the boxes. And I could use margin, but there is a much smarter way using Flexbox than just using margins. because when you use margin, you can specify, for example, 30 pixel. And instead of specifying 30 pixel, I want a smarter way I want to let the browser automatically calculate the space needed here. And I'm going to show you how to do that. For that, you need to specify the justify content property. And the justify content property has several values. For example, one is the flex start. This is actually the default one. So this means that I want to justify my content to the beginning of my flex. Where is the beginning of my flex? Where is flex start? So let me draw that. So this is pretty much the container box. This is the cart holder. And if I say flex start, every item in the flex box will go to the beginning of this box. This is the flex start. In this case, this is the left-hand side of the box. I can change it to flex end, and it will go to the end of the box. See, now it's every item is on the right-hand side because this is the end of the flex box. Cool. These are cool options, but what I actually want is I want to say space between. So as you can see, my browser automatically calculated the remaining space and automatically divided my boxes accordingly. So I didn't have to calculate myself, is this 30 pixels? Is this 40 pixels? No, it's automatically calculated by the browser. So this is a more convenient way of solving this problem. So this is how you should do this solution. There are, of course, several other options for justify content. For example, there is space around, which is similar to space between, but there is also space at the beginning and at the end. I prefer actually space between better, so I'm going to leave that way. And we are pretty much done, but I'm still going to show you other features of the Flexbox because there are awesome other features. For example, what happens if one of the boxes are larger than the others? Because this is an easy case right now because every box is the same width and height. And what happens if, for example, the second box is larger? I can easily make it larger by putting in some text. This is some text. And now my second box is larger and every other item in the Flexbox became larger as well. So the default behavior for a Flexbox, I'm going to get rid of the surroundings now. So the default behavior of the Flexbox is to stretch each item to the largest item. So the second one, the middle one, is the largest. So the others will stretch out, become larger or taller, basically. What if I want to change that? I actually want to keep the original size of my boxes. I can do that by saying align items. Align items. And again, there are multiple options. For example, flex start. Flex start. This way they are aligned to the start, which is, of course, right now is the top of the page. Or I can say flex end, similarly to the previous one. And now every item is now aligned to the end of the flex box. This is the bottom, obviously, of the flex box right now. Cool. I could also say center. And now they are in the middle. This is the best one in my opinion. It looks very symmetrical. Very nice. So, a bit of theory here. So, there are two main axes in Flexbox. The one is the main axis. In this case, this is the main axis. And the other is the cross axis. So, main and cross. And for me, I always forgot if justify content is for the main or the cross. I always forgot that, but this happens. Justify content is for the main axis. And the align items is for the cross axis. Now, there's a trick here. I can actually swap the main and the cross axis. If I want to, I can say flex direction. I can say column. And now the axes are swapped, actually. So in this case, this axis is now the main axis. So this is the main. And this is the cross axis. Because the flex direction is now a column. So they are below each other right now. The default behavior, and the one I need right now, is row. That's the default behavior. So my items are in a row and not in the column. There's another option. I can also reverse the order of the items. So I can say row reverse. Now I was able to reverse just from CSS the order of my items. So now the plant trees is now the last item and the profit is the first item, just with a single line of CSS. Pretty awesome, isn't it? Let's go back to the row, because that's what I actually want. I just showed you that this is an option. So you already asked, and I wanted to show you this. What happens if there is a fourth item, right? Because right now we have 3 boxes. And someone asked, what happens if there is another card? So what I'm going to do is I'll just copy the third card, and I'm going to paste it here. Now, because I have 4 cards, there is not enough space for my cards, so they are going to start to overlap a little bit. Sometimes this is desirable. Sometimes you actually want to start a new line. And you can actually start a new line by using the flex wrap. So flex wrap, and I can say wrap. Okay, that's much better, right? Because now every item has the original size, they are not overlapping, and the fourth item starts on another row. Let's check out what happens if the screen is not big enough. So if I start to decrease the screen, it won't work because I set a fixed width. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the width of the container. Currently the width of the container is fixed 600 pixels. I'm going to change it to max width. This means that if there is enough space, please leave it 600 pixels. But if there is not enough space, then please make it smaller. Just fill up the available space. So if I start to make it smaller, you will see that the container becomes smaller. The space between starts to decrease. And then, boom, they are now in two separate lines automatically because there wasn't enough space. If there is enough space for even 4, it won't change because I set the max width to 600. But if I change it to 1000, then you see that now there is enough space for 4 items and they are now next to each other. Yes, it's good for mobile view. Exactly. This is ideal for mobile clients. Okay. So let's go back to 600. This is the original. I'm going to remove this extra text here. I'm going to remove the extra text because I want to show you something, another thing. So where's my extra text? It's in the second. Yeah, it's in the second card. I'm going to remove this extra text. And right now, I don't really have spacing here. What I can do is I can make the box taller. So for example, if I want to make this whole box taller, I can set some height so that I can show you another Flexbox feature. For example, I can set it to 700 pixels. It didn't change much. What if I change it to 900 pixels? Oh, I didn't want to change the container. I wanted to change the height of the card holder. So I'm going back to the card holder. And I'm going to change the height of the card holder to be larger. Okay, now this is too large. Let's go back to 700. And or maybe even smaller, 500. Okay. So currently I'm going to draw the border as well so that you can see border solid thin black. So my card holder is right now this big. And there is some space here, some space here, some space here, and I can control the spacing here as well with another property. And this is called the align content. Align content. And again, the same rules. I can say flex start. Now with align content, I can align the lines. If there are multiple lines, if I'm using wrapping into multiple lines, I can use the align content property to say that my lines should be aligned to the top, which is the flex start in this case. It's the flex start, which is the top in this case. I could also say flex end, which would move them to the bottom of the container. And again, you can use space between. Okay. So these are So to be completely honest, I always forgot which one is justify content, align items, and align content. I always mix up these because it's really hard to remember for me. So what I always do is I type in Flexbox into Google, and oh no, not this, just simply Flexbox. And the first website is CSS Tricks, and this is simply the best material about Flexbox. I always use this because I always forget the specific properties. And here on this site, you can quickly check. Oh, I wanted to set the justify content. The images are going to load in a second. Just my connection is slower while I'm streaming. So there are nice images here, which makes it much easier to see. Yeah. See, so for example, if I want to justify the content, I see that, oh, I have to use the justify content, and here are nice images to use to understand the meaning of the specific CSS property. Or if I want to do something else, for example, I want to align items in the center. I know that I have to use the align items property. Again, I can use align content. If my items are wrapping into multiple lines, I can use this. This is the align content. I always use this page because I always forget which one is align content, align items, and justify content. I always mix these up. I just use this page. Okay. So let's get rid of this border because that's not what I really wanted. And the last thing I want to show you is what happens if my items doesn't have a fixed size, fixed width. So if I go to the card, where is my card? If I go to my card and I remove the fixed width, if I remove the fixed width, you can see that Flexbox will actually automatically size the boxes based on their content. And if one of the box had a larger content, for example, if the second box has slightly larger content, it will end up being larger, and all the others are going to stay the same. And the space between, because I've used the space between justify in the cart holder, I use space between. The space is automatically recalculated, so it still looks pretty good. But sometimes I want to allow my items to grow larger. So what I can do is I can go to my item, which is a card, and on the card I can say flex grow 1. This will allow my items to grow as long as there is enough space. So this is all about telling the Flexbox what to do with the remaining space. Yeah. Cool. So these are the tricks I wanted to show you regarding the Flexbox. And now I want to have a 10-minute break, and after the 10-minute break I'm going to open up for a Q&A session. Let's see what questions you have in 10 minutes. So we are going to continue at 6:10. So roughly in 10 minutes. Okay, welcome back from the break. Let's have the Q&A sessions. I checked the questions in the meantime, and one question was, so flex growth does override space between. Yeah, it kind of overrides it. I mean, obviously, if you have flex growth, the space between won't work anymore. Another question, how to set the background. While you can go into this, no, it's not, it's in your profile settings. So what you can do is you go to the profile settings, and in the profile settings, you can change a lot of things. For example, you can change the theme of your editor, and you can also change, I'm not sure where. Yeah, I think here you can change the font family, you can change the theme. I'm not sure where you change it to dark background. Maybe if you change to a dark theme, it will change the background to dark as well, I suppose. Okay. Yes. So we only have a QA session, and I'm also going to share some useful information about where to find the exercises and where to get help if you are stuck. A little bit about Discord as well. So there's no new material today. So okay, so one question is how do you expand the HTML tags? For example, if I type div and then I hit tab, it will automatically expand it to tab, and it's quite smart, because if you use it for an image and you hit tab, it will automatically create the required attributes for it as well. For the image tag, the source and the alt attributes are required, so it will automatically generate that for you. That's a pretty good tip. I think you should use it to make your life easier. You can type faster this way, so it's good to use it. Okay, I think if this doesn't work for you, you can go to these settings again, and it should be enabled here. This is called the emmet. So if you tick this checkbox, it will automatically do this tab expanding thing for you. And you can also add your custom snippets. Okay, so yeah, so I haven't seen any other questions. So what I want to talk about right now is where to find actually the exercises. So what we saw yesterday, that a lot of you found it hard to actually find the exercises to solve. So we try to make it easier for you. What I want you is to go to the to the Stay at Home website. So it's called stayathome.greenfoxacademy. This is where you can find all the important links for the material review stream. You have the recording from yesterday, and of course the recording from today is going to be available here as well. And here you can find the link to the exercise syllabus. So you really want to follow this link, the exercise syllabus. And instead of GitHub, we created a separate website for you. So we realized that it was really hard for you to get familiar with GitHub, and it was kind of a complex website to use. So instead of using GitHub, now you have this nice website which is generated based on the content. And here you can see the whole schedule. Here is week 1, and you can see the workshop for yesterday, and you can also see the workshop for tomorrow. So tomorrow what you want to do is you want to click on this link, Thursday's workshop, HTML and CSS Advanced. If you follow this link, you will see all the exercises you can solve. For example, this is the first exercise. These are pretty much the warm-up exercises, and then you have all the other exercises. For example, if you want to start with the first one, you can click on links to the web, and you have all the text which describes the actual exercise, and these are images which shows you what the results should look like. You have example code here. So these are the exercises to do. And at the top of every exercise, there is questions to this exercise. So let's imagine you try to do this exercise. For example, you try to add these images and you got stuck somehow. First of all, you can ask your study group. On Discord, you already have a study group, and you can ask the others in your study group if you got stuck. Maybe someone else can help you. If together with your study group you couldn't figure out the solution, you can go to questions to this exercise. So here is the help, questions to this exercise. This will open up another website for questions and answers. For example, this is an example question: how to put a custom image as a background. And here Alex already answered this awesome question. Thank you, Alex. So first of all, look through the questions. Did anyone else ask these questions? Maybe yes. Maybe someone else got stuck at the exact same spot. So maybe there is already a question which answers your question. If not, then you can ask your own question. So I have another question, so I'm going to ask my own question. And I'm completely stuck. For example, I don't know what the images are. I don't know what an image is. I don't know what an image is. Please help. And what you should always do is you should put your code here. So if you have already written some code and just got stuck, then you should paste your code here so that the others can see what did you try so far, where are you right now. Or a more easier thing to do is just go to your CodePen, copy the URL. So this is the web address for your CodePen. Copy the web address and paste it in your question. So this is what I got so far. Boom. And yeah, I can just then click on ask your question. So now my question is here on the website. and anyone can add an answer. So if someone, for example, another attendee or a mentor can answer your question, they will put their answer here and it will appear here below your question. So this is how you get help if you got stuck. So these are the exercises again, and you can use AskBot. This is called askbot.greenfox.academy to ask your questions. Okay, let's see if you have any other questions I may help with. Is it possible to merge groups? Yes, it's possible. Please text me on Discord. So what you can do is, I'm going to open up Discord. And I am going to open up Discord and we are going to talk a little bit about Discord. Okay, Discord is now open. And this is how Discord looks like for me, because I see every single study group. There are a lot of study groups, of course. I won't be able to see the discussion in every single study group because there are so many study groups. I won't be able to read every single study group's chat. But what you can do is, my name is Selpe here, and you can text me and say, hey, I want to merge my study group with another because it's too small or something like that, and we can solve that. And later maybe we are going to even automatically merge small groups. We'll see how that goes, if we can automatically merge small groups into larger groups. We'll see how that goes. So I hope you've already noticed that there is a general channel and an info channel. And the info channel, you have all the information. This is the same for the Czech and the Hungarian Discord, by the way. You have general and info channel, and you can see all the information in the info channel. You should read this regularly. If you have question, you should ask your question in your study group. Maybe someone else can help you in the study group. But if you can't solve it with your study group, then you can use the Ask bot, where you can ask your question. Okay. Are there any other questions I should answer right now? What do you think? The CodePen link. I can send you the CodePen link. And I'm also going to add the CodePen link to the description as well. Okay. I don't think there are other questions for today. So how about we wrap up today's stream? And I hope you will continue to solve the exercises tomorrow. Yes, there are no other content less. We haven't finished the task. Why? I think it's pretty much finished. I just showed extra features for Textbox, Flexbox. Is there a way to fast debug if a closing div tag is wrong position? Well, you can. It's no fast solution for that. You can just try to check. So if you think the closing HTML tag is not in the good position, what I would usually do is I just close up my tags and start to count my open tags. So I would usually start counting. I have one open tag, one closing tag, one open tag, one closing tag. So this is how I debug if I have enough closing tags or not. I just start to close everything and open up again. Another question is, could you show if you have 5 boxes and you want to put 2 under the 3, how you move them to the holes? I don't really understand this question. What are the holes? So if you have 5 boxes, so now you have 5 boxes. And what is the question here? I don't really understand. If you want to invite someone to your study group, just text me on Discord and I'm going to change the study groups so that you are together in the study group. Three under 2. So what Flexbox does is will automatically place the boxes for you. So if you don't have enough space, it will put 2 boxes below 3. This is how Flexbox works. If you want something different, maybe Flexbox is not the best solution for you, because Flexbox, as the name says, it's a way to it's a flexible way of to position our boxes. So if there is not enough space, 2 boxes will be below. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap up here. I'm not sure how to. I think there are no questions left which I can see right now, which I can answer right now and understand. So I'm going to wrap this stream up. You can start actually solving the exercises anytime, so you don't have to wait until 3 p.m. tomorrow. You can start the exercises even now or tomorrow morning, and hope you will have an awesome time learning and exercising. And we are going to continue streaming next week, Monday. So have a nice evening. Bye!